The Adulting with ADHD podcast is not a substitute for medical advice. Please see a medical professional if you think you have ADHD or if you have questions about your current treatment. To support this podcast or to access the podcast archives, visit patreon.com/adultingwithadhd. This is the Adulting with ADHD podcast, self-empowerment for people with ADHD.
I'm very excited to have with me Anna Granta, who is an ADHD coach based in the UK. Welcome, Anna.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm very excited to be talking with you today. First off, this episode is about ADHD and trauma. To kick things off, would you like to share with the listeners your ADHD diagnosis story?
So when I was a child, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. I was fortunate to have a teacher who had a close family member with dyslexia. So she was able to spot those signs at a time when a lot of children were not diagnosed with anything. But dyslexia was what she knew. Dyslexia was what she identified. It was what I was tested for, and it was what I was diagnosed with. Nobody thought to look into ADHD, even though they often come together. So fast forward 20-something years, and I left a good job in tech due to a combination of being burnt out and having to support my son with a tricky transition to school. So I looked around at all the things I was doing in my current job to try and figure out what do I want to do next? What do I love? And I realized that what I loved most was when people would appear at my desk and go, we've heard you're good to talk to. I need to talk to somebody. And I'd be like, this is interesting. Let me ignore all my work, which I'm procrastinating on, and go and talk to you about stuff.
Yeah.
And that was what I loved. I love listening to people, listening to them talk through their problems and nudging them towards figuring out simple, effective solutions. Like, I went into tech to solve problems, but people are so much more rewarding to work with than computers. So I impulsively quit my successful tech career and decided to train as a life coach. I didn't know that I had ADHD at this point, but a couple of local women in my area had ADHD. They'd just been diagnosed, and they'd heard that they should find an ADHD coach. And this was before the pandemic. So they were looking locally for people that they could work with face to face. And there weren't any in my area. In the UK, there still now aren't that many, something that people are only now beginning to be more aware of. So they found me and they asked if I would be willing to learn about ADHD and support them. And I was like, yes, let's learn about a new thing. Let's do all the research. This sounds exciting. So after a lot of reading and talking with them and learning, the penny kind of dropped for me. Oh, there's a reason that I get on so well with these women, that I totally understand their struggles and can empathize with them really easily. About 2 years ago, I had gone through that process and I gathered up my courage and I went to speak to my GP, who referred me on for an adult ADHD assessment. And I'm still on that waiting list.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you poor thing. We had spoken offline, or should I say online, on Twitter, about the intersection of trauma and ADHD. And your experience, how does trauma hide ADHD for you?
Yeah, so I was desperate to please my teachers, right, to get that adult approval. And that was a real motivation to focus in class, even when it was hard, to sit quietly, to behave, not to attract the wrong kind of attention. And I did brilliantly academically. And I think that was one of the things that meant that nobody was really considering ADHD, because ADHD is naughty boys who won't sit still, keep throwing things, and do poorly in class. I was none of those. I was sitting at the back, unobtrusively playing with my hair, doodling a little bit, staring out the window, not causing anybody any trouble.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, that's a whole other, and is that the traumatic part for you?
No, school was actually my safe place.
That was your happy place. Okay.
Yeah, school was where I knew what the rules were and I knew that I could perform. maybe it was a lot of effort, but the rules were consistent and I loved that.
Yeah.
But I think it was the traumatic experiences that made me so desperate to get the approval of my teachers. And
Yeah.
then as I got older, people please, which I think helped hide some of the social struggles. I've always been able to read people very well. Again, it's a trauma response because you
Yeah.
sense when those dangerous adults are having a bad day. So you can move out the way. So we're very good at reading people and adjusting my behavior to keep other people comfortable. And that means that people think that you know what you're doing socially.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. This is hitting home a little bit because I too was a goody two shoes and wanted to just fade away. And you're right. It makes it easy to mask the whole thing, even if you don't even know you're masking. It makes it very easy to do when you're well behaved. What steps did you take to be able to? You mentioned a little bit in your intro that now you're on a waiting list. But let's rewind a little bit to when you first realized there might be something more there. What did you do?
I think I avoided it for a little bit. I was already reading all of these books, both to support people that I was working with, but also I knew that my son was struggling to adjust to school and I was starting to read about why that might be.
Yeah.
And so I was very immersed in almost like the culture of neurodivergence before I realized they were always my people because I always knew I had the dyslexia, but then I was like, no, this is not a So it's hard to really pinpoint a moment where I was like, I think it was hard for me to phone that GP. I was absolutely terrified.
I don't know if you've ever been put on a waiting list, but therapy is hard to come by these days. If you need therapy and you need someone to talk to, consider BetterHelp. I've been using BetterHelp on and off since the pandemic, and it's honestly been really helpful when I can't reach my normal therapist. To save 10% off your first month, visit betterhelp.com/ADHDadulting. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/ADHDadulting.
That I would be dismissed, that I would be ignored, that I wouldn't be taken seriously. And that isn't what happened at all, actually. I have to say the GP was very understanding, very professional, but I did a lot of homework before I made that call. So I don't really have a moment where a life went off.
Absolutely. It's seldom like this linear journey or like the movie moment of, oh my God. So when you were connecting, like you seem to have connected the trauma and ADHD relationship, was that just in your readings or how were you able to? I'm going a little off script here, and this isn't one of the questions. Yeah.
It's funny, a lot of people can be reluctant to diagnose someone who definitely has trauma with ADHD because there can be overlap. There is overlap in how they present. But also, ADHD is a factor that puts you at increased risk of trauma,
Right.
So a lot of people do have both. And in my work, I've come to realize that experiences are not by default traumatic or not traumatic. It depends on the individual and how they experience those things. And if you have ADHD, you're experiencing them a bit differently to other people. And I think that we can, find things traumatic, which other people do not find traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, that would be driving for me. And then I don't know how many ADHDers have highway driving anxiety, but boy, that triggers me every time. So what are some of the major learnings you've come across as you're working with your clients and going on your own exploration?
In terms of trauma, do you mean? Or
Yeah. Do you see this coming up with your clients? Or like especially like workplace trauma, for example, like that can stem from ADHD. I guess I'll rephrase this. If you had one major, like for the people listening right now, one major learning about reconciling, like that's I guess that's even a whole other question. Is trauma and ADHD, is that something to be reconciled or is it just something to be aware of? Do you have an opinion about that, or what's your approach to working through those things?
So I think it's helpful to understand if you have trauma and if you have ADHD. So you just know when to be really gentle with yourself, when to go, this is super hard for me. And actually, maybe it's too hard right now. And I'm going to take a step back or try something else. I think it's super important for neurodivergent people to be really aware when they're choosing therapists. Many of us need therapists. Therapy can be really helpful to choose someone who is trauma informed as well as knowledgeable about whatever neurodivergent conditions we might have, because a lot of not trauma informed therapy can actually further traumatize somebody who is neurodivergent with a history of trauma.
Really interesting.
So CBT, for example, I was prescribed CBT for anxiety before I knew I had ADHD. I think this is quite common with women with undiagnosed ADHD. So the problem was I was overwhelmed by having a new baby and specifically getting out of the house with a new baby. Like, it's hard. There's a lot of steps. You've got to do them in the right order, and then they like throw up or the nappy explodes and you've got to go back to the beginning and do all the steps again.
Yeah.
It was something that I really struggled with. And this led to me kind of avoiding going out, right, and almost becoming a bit agoraphobic. So that was picked up as anxiety. But then in the CBT, it's all about like, your anxious thoughts are irrational. Just ignore your anxious thoughts and do the thing anyway. Just be a grown up and get out of the house. How hard can it even be? And that was super unhelpful and unkind, genuinely hard. Like, I needed practical strategies. This is how you pack a diaper bag. This is the list of things you've got to do. Let's laminate it and stick it on your door. Not like it's in your head. Just get over it. Because it wasn't in my head. It was hard.
You fix your thinking, this will be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Any closing thoughts? I think this is all very valuable.
Another trauma response is to be fiercely independent, right? And this is something that I have to really work through and learn that what we need other people, we can do far more when we let other people help us. Because when we have ADHD, there are certain things that we are not great at. And actually, if you can have somebody else help you with that really complicated form, either do it or sit with you and kind of body double and motivate you while you do it, it's going to make a big difference. And people are so willing to help if you let them. And actually, if you can be a bit vulnerable and let people know when you need help, that really increases your connection with people. And so that's been a really big learning for me to be vulnerable, accept help, ask for things, and connect into those good supportive relationships in my life.
Yeah, just an observation. When you had people coming to your desk for help, you probably didn't think twice about helping them.
Of course not. I was delighted to help them.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to us, we just have no clue how to accept that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. This has been really, I just relate so much to it because it's on the career front, on the mom front. There's so many ways that this shows up. And then, like you said, it's like the chicken and egg thing. Like, did the ADHD cause the trauma? Did the trauma cause the ADHD? And I don't know about you, but in my travels, I have finally stopped trying to make it all make sense and just there's a level of acceptance, right? This is happening and we're still learning stuff. Even as a field. Yeah. But for our listeners who are looking for this extra support, where can they find you online?
So my website is grantacoaching.com, and that has info on, I do one-to-one coaching and I do group coaching. I've got self-study programs on there as well. So you can find the learning method that works for you. On April 14th, I'm giving a free training called Recognizing Burnout. I would love to see some of your listeners there. I gave that training last year and the feedback was amazing. So don't miss that. And then after that, I'll be launching Burnout Recovery Crew, which is a group coaching program for burnout ADHDers. So that is, again, the feedback from the beta testers has been so encouraging. So if you are burnt out or you're susceptible to burnout and you want to break out of those boom and bust cycles, then then that is for you. We will learn how to relax because that isn't something that comes naturally to many of us, but we can practice it, we can learn it, how to find balance. So moving away from that boom and bust to a more kind of steady state, knowing our needs, getting the help that we need, and then we will learn to really tap into our creativity and our passions and get that joy of being a creative human with a brilliant brain. But yes, it definitely has its problems and its struggles, but we can do the most amazing things with our problem solving and our imagination and our ability to connect to other people. So I love showing that to ADHDers once we've got the foundations in place, so that you're not going to have a great idea and then feel a failure when it doesn't come to fruition, but when you've actually got those foundations that you can do the stuff that you want to do. And finally, you found me on Twitter, where my handle is Anna Granta. So I will always welcome, new people there to say hi. And my Instagram is Granta Coaching.
Awesome, Anna. I just want to say, for those listening, I'm watching her, and she just lit up when she started talking about her coaching practice and helping everybody. And it takes our conversation full circle, because when we first started talking, you mentioned people coming to your desk and you loving helping them. And I love seeing the passion here. And this burnout course sounds amazing and timely and so relevant. So thank you so much for all that you do for our community. And it was really wonderful talking to you today.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been really great to be on your show, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Same here, Anna. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.